100 years ago, 15 motion picture photographers in the early days of Hollywood formed a group to exchange ideas on the artistry of camera work. They would soon become the American Society of Cinematographers. The ASC is the oldest and possibly most exclusive cinema society in the world, an organization where membership is by invitation only and one of the highest honors in filmmaking. Over the decades, the ASC has followed its mission to stay on the forefront of evolving technology, while promoting education through master classes, led by members mentoring the next generation of cinematographers. Housed in one of the oldest buildings in Hollywood, entering the home of the ASC is an amazing experience for any film lover. It's a museum of one-of-a-kind film cameras that recorded countless classic films of Hollywood. Stunning behind-the-scenes photos, and amazing cinema memorabilia, from one of the Lumiere brothers' cinematographs to the Mitchell BNC2 camera that Greg Tolan used to shoot Citizen Kane. To mark the centennial of the ASC, we sat down in the clubhouse off Hollywood Boulevard to chat with 4 ASC cinematographers. Capping off our series marking the ASC centennial, it was a privilege for the Full Exposure crew to be invited to record the August episodes. And for the last of 4 interviews from Hollywood, I was really delighted to have a chance to speak with legendary cinematographer Dean Cundey. To multitudes of cinephiles, Dean's career as a visual storyteller needs no introduction. From his childhood fascination with set design to his partnerships with directors like Spielberg, Zemeckis, and Carpenter, Dean Cundey is considered by countless cinema fans as one of the most prolific and influential cinematographers of the last 4 decades. Dean's filmography reads like an IMDb chart of box office groundbreaking movies and blockbuster genre classics like Halloween, The Thing, Escape from New York, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Back to the Future, and Jurassic Park, to name just a few. And as befits a young man fortunate enough to learn from the likes of cinematographer James Wong Howe, who also taught film students, Dean is regularly involved in mentoring aspiring DPs through the ASC Masterclass program. Dean, it's a great honor to meet you and be here in this hallowed space and historical space.
Thank you very much. You know, I never come here without thinking about the past and being amazed at, what I've been able to do, to accomplish my dream in life. So,
yeah, I mean, when you first walk in here, it's for any lover of film, especially for any aspiring cinematographer, it's a jaw-dropping experience.
Oh yeah, and we have such an embodiment of film history, of cinematography history. Starting with the magic lantern back there, to the most contemporary digital cameras. So it's a great place to come and look and have a tangible connection to the past.
I mean, of course, I was immediately drawn to the Mitchell that was that Greg Tolan shot much of Citizen Kane with.
Yeah, and again, that's sort of what I always feel is when I come here and I see the actual real device that made film history, and the fact that I can go and touch cameras that were, some of them probably made film history, others were just working cameras that created the film industry and the art of cinematography.
I mentioned the word aspiring, and I know that I've read and seen a few interviews with you where you talk about what was your first real influence in wanting to not just get into film, but to be a cinematographer. Would you tell us just a little bit about that? It may have been talked about a lot, but I think it's a really interesting story about inspiration.
When I was a kid, I was always interested in creative stuff. Like most kids, I enjoyed, drawing and crayons and stuff. When I was, 10 to 12 years old, we would go to the movies quite a bit, my family and I. And my mother would drop us, myself and a couple of my neighborhood friends, drop us off at the local theater for the Saturday Kids Matinee. And I was just completely awestruck by the fact that films could take us on these journeys that we could go places we couldn't go in real life. We could be shown and made to think about stuff that wasn't part of real life. And so I was intrigued by the stories, but also by the craft and technique and what these people, whoever they were able to do to take us on these journeys. And I got fascinated by the creative aspect of filmmaking. And so I would make little sets out of cardboard and so forth, just to create 3D spaces. And one of my initial thoughts was, well, having seen 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, I looked at that and I said, wow, what great creation of fantasy, but it looks like it's real, and those people are in that space. So I became interested in production design. I didn't know it was called that at that point. It was the guys who made the sets. And so I sort of thought of that as the creative aspect of film, because, you watch a movie, you sort of are aware of the fact that you're looking at something. You're not aware, I don't think, as an early viewer, and even now, the fact that the reason you can see it is because some cinematographer captured what was out there and put it onto, in my day, film, now into digital, so that we can experience whatever is out there, sets, locations, performances, and so forth. So I became fascinated with production design, but then eventually I began to see that the guys with the really great sort of control of how the storytelling is were cinematographers. When I was in high school, I went across the street, Main Street in Alhambra, to the local camera store. And I was looking around because I had set up a little dark room in my room downstairs and was interested in photography and capturing images. Went across the street to this camera shop, and there was a newsstand in there, magazine stand. And one of the magazines was American Cinematographer. And I thought, oh, this is about filmmaking. And I got an issue, looked through it and said, wow, these guys have the coolest job ever. Look, they are running the camera and they're lighting the thing and they're capturing the image. I read the thing cover to cover. The next month, I rushed over and got the next edition. And each month, for about, 4 or 5 months, I would go and get the next issue. Finally, my mother consented and said, okay, we'll get you a subscription. And that became sort of my window at an early age, high school, to cinematography and the guys who capture the images. And I think that's when I sort of decided that I wanted to go into cinematography and be part of that aspect of filmmaking. Over a period of time, obviously, cinematography has changed. How we see films has changed. You look at the very early silent films, and they look to us as kind of crude, black and white, flickery, not always sharp because it's a copy of a copy of
Not
a copy.
not in real motion.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the storytelling is bigger and broader. And I think that's because early filmmaking came from the concept of photographing theater. And performances for theater, especially in those days, were very big and broad. Makeup was,
Theatrical.
very, very stylized. Yeah. So, but over a period of time, we've come to accept a very more natural view of the world around us. Sometimes not natural because it's science fiction-y or superheroes or whatever. But it somehow seems more real to us. Well, then here comes digital, and here comes the computer, and it now gives us almost unfettered control of the image. We can do almost anything we want. In fact, we could probably do anything we want. And so I think that over a period of time, the audience's view of the stories, the view that the cinematographer provided, has gotten a lot more complex. And very often, it involves a lot more people. Yes, there are simple dramas, simple romantic comedies, which essentially are photographing actors' characters going through a story. But then there's the other end of it, which are these gigantic, epic action films and superhero films and so forth, which take us into a world that is essentially completely impossible, as we know it anyway now, with the ability for characters to fly and buildings to be destroyed by a guy's punch and, things like that. So our credibility is being challenged. But in order to do that, it takes an awful lot of people. It takes visual effects people and production designers and special effects people, mechanical effects, and cinematographers and just a lot of different skills and artists. So I think that no one person now really sort of controls the storytelling for those kinds of films. Even the director, who in theory is the mastermind of that, in practicality, if you watch the process of a big action film or whatever being made, you realize that the director is the guiding force, but very often people who are in visual effects or whatever, even writers, do what I call going into business for themselves. They create the images or the techniques or the effects or whatever, kind of the way they would like to do it. And then they present it, and very often the director or producer will say, oh, yeah, that's good. That's even better than I thought it would be. So it's becoming more of a community effort. And the trick is to keep that community focused on, I think, what is essential. We as cinematographers, we've always been focused, no pun intended. Okay, maybe that's right. We've always been focused on capturing an image that an audience will understand and believe. And, especially in the 30s and 40s, when that was sort of the limits of what you could do. Human stories, comedies, thrillers, and so forth. Over a period of time, the cinematographer, who was so much a part of and was the right or left hand of the director, has become one of the contributors. And I hate to see some of that, the skill and artistry of the cinematographer, disappear, be overridden, which is possible because, for many years, we as cinematographers were in charge of the science. And there's a tremendous amount of science in cinematography. Lenses and depth of field and how many lumens come out of a 2K light, and what's the exposure contrast ratio, and on and on and on. And that was sort of what we contributed to the process. Handling all of that science, but very importantly, with an understanding of the artistry, of the visual storytelling, and how to accomplish what a director and what a writer and what performers and the production designer wanted to have end up on the film. We were responsible for capturing it and adding our own sensibilities, our own artistry, our own skills to the process, so that we could, for instance, it's very much about composition of a shot that tells an audience where they're supposed to look when. The lighting of the shot creates the mood. Will also tell the audience where to look. So as cinematographers, we have always had to understand that. How do we, touch an audience? How do we, tell a story so that their brain and their heart, embrace it? So I think that I'm leery of it, becoming too fragmented. The fact that I would take an image and say that's the perfect one, and then have someone say, you know what I think would be better, and change it. Now, if it's better, fine. But if it just happens to be someone exerting control or whatever for their own satisfaction, gratification, then I think it's an unfortunate thing. We should all be working for the movie. We should all be working for the audience. Something I've always felt. We shouldn't work for ourselves. We should bring ourselves to a project on behalf of the audience. What's the best way to tell the story? We, as cinematographers, have to learn more science. We have to understand computers and what the compositing guys are doing and how they're doing it. We have to understand how we supply the right parts, the right pieces, the right images to them, so that our contribution is not, just, somebody saying, oh, well, that's okay, but let's wipe out that area. And that area seems too dark to me. And maybe the frame should be over here. So let's blow it up a little and move it. And I've heard these portentous predictions that what some of the producers want is the ability to shoot in 8K, a wide shot, and then decide after the fact how to light it, how to compose it. We need a close-up here. Now we'll do the two-shot. Now the other close-up
here. The computer
here
becomes the de facto cinematographer almost.
Exactly. And all of it controlled by maybe some guy who doesn't understand images and visual storytelling and how to touch an audience. It's I've had experiences where I would work on the film with a director, and we have a stylish shot done. Producer would say, but where are the close-ups? Where are the close-ups? Well, you don't need it because see how these characters, no, we need close-ups. Well, the producer had come out of television where he had learned that the human face close-up is what the audience needs to understand the dialogue and so forth. Not true. So when I went to the screening of this particular film, I was amazed to see some close-ups that we hadn't done. And he had blown up a two-shot, and the close-up was facing the wrong direction, and it was very grainy, and it was, unusual. Well, he had this overriding concept in his mind that you needed close-ups, and he exerted his influence. And as a result, in my humble estimation, degraded the actual work that we had all carefully thought about. So, I'm leery that kind of control will keep, the people who are truly concerned with visual storytelling from being able to, perform their skills in artistry.
You're very involved in mentorship through the ASC, like so many members are. You had a pretty amazing experience as a college student at UCLA. Could you tell us a little bit about that, with who was your teacher and who influenced you somewhat?
Well, at UCLA, I got interested in truly being a cinematographer. And there were a couple classes, but they were very theoretical. One book we had that was cinematography was just purely the science. It was, color science and depth of field, and discussed all of this. And there was nothing that was really about the visual artistry, the visual storytelling. And my last semester, I heard that they were going to have a special cinematography class. And it was going to be taught by James Wong Howe.
Well,
James Wong Howe, Academy Award-winning, very important cinematographer. He came up from the silent period. He came up, through great black and white films, and he was about that age when he was, I think, in his late 70s, and he was going to teach this class, and I was able to weasel my way into it because it was my last semester. And it was an amazing class because we would build a little set, a little three-walled set, which would have a window and a door and some interesting wallpaper or whatever on the stage. And each, I think it was twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays, each class, he would show up, he would talk a little bit about some theory, and then he would make us become the crew. And each time somebody would be designated the operator, camera assistant, and we had an old Mitchell, and gaffer, electricians, key grip, and each time we would become this crew, and he would teach us the practical aspects. No, don't do that. To uncoil the cable first, then and open the barn doors, then you turn the light on. And okay. So we learned practical stuff. In the meantime, he was saying, okay, now this set, today it is a seedy hotel room. And he'd say, so let's put a light out the window that shines up, and we'll put a student on there blinking it, because that's the neon sign. Then it's dark and a little light over here. So we would create this, and we could see the creative process that he went through, teaching you to analyze what is the shot about, how do you create that mood. Then the next class, we'd switch around, become other crew people, and he would say, okay, today this is a fancy lady's boudoir. The opposite. Now, what's the thought process of turning the same set into a different look, just with lighting and where the camera goes and so forth? It was the most revealing class I had taken in the whole time. Then he would also, we would go to the theater, and he would run dailies from something he was working on. I think The Heart is a Lonely Hunter. And he would run clips out of films. And he would talk about the creative process. And we had practical look at it. It became one of the best classes I had ever taken. So revealing, so practical, that's what I've tried to do myself. I just recently taught a university level class and made the students become the crew, and would talk them through the process and teach them how to use the equipment, how to use a light and so forth, because that practical aspect may mean that they can actually get a job working on somebody's film if they understand it. What's the protocol?
Right.
Who do you listen to? Who do you make suggestions to? You don't go up to the director and say, yeah, that seems like a silly way to compose this, or to the camera operator. No, there's certain protocols, and that may help them become a desirable crew member where they can actually do entry-level work and so forth. So that class I had from James Wong Howe so impressed me that that's what I've tried to emulate. As I talk to students and I teach and so forth, one of the first things I do is I ask them about their viewing. What do they watch? And I say, how many here have seen Casablanca? And maybe two of them. And I'll say, how about any of you know who Humphrey Bogart is? And how many have seen a black and white film? And I'm surprised at how few students actually understand the history of filmmaking. So their view is just the most recent movies. And sometimes those are good. Sometimes the recent movies are made really cool by guys who want to make something really cool. And the best way to do that is to turn the camera upside down or something weird. Without understanding, how do you tell a story? How do you engage an audience? How do we take the 100 years of learning a new language, literally, the visual language of film and storytelling? How do you build on that? And it's like saying, well, I'm an English major. I'm actually a professor of English. So who? Charles Dickens? No, never read him. Mark Twain? Wait, I've heard the name. You wouldn't think of teaching English without understanding where did it all come from and how can it be used or modernized, or how can we dip back and to tell a story in old English because that section gives authenticity to, some book you're writing, some novel. So I think it's sad when, first of all, kids in high school are not taught film history, film literature, because so much of their world now is television.
Yeah.
How many of them actually read books for fun? Not as many as there should be. But how many of them have seen films and understand where their language of visual understanding comes from?
Okay. Right.
So I'm often disappointed by that, and very often I'll try to show them clips from old movies, and I'll try to ignore the yawning. I'll ignore the sighing. that kind of stuff. Because I try to make it relevant. I'll say, look, here is telling a scene with one shot, one moving camera. Watch how it engages us. Watch how we pay attention to the characters and not the cutting and not the cutaways. Life is one long Steadicam shot. It's not even handheld, because handheld, has this kind of jerky.
Yeah. Or now it's a gimbal.
Yeah. Now it's, and as people, our brain, our eyes, correct so that we get this impression of moving through life in one long, continuous shot, with the exception that we cut every now and then when we go to sleep.
So we have to wrap up, but I'm curious about you've covered so many different popular genres in your work that's very widely known and loved. What might you want to do that you haven't done yet?
I've gotten interested recently in sort of smaller indie films, because you can really be creatively in control. You can
Getting back to
exactly, getting back to working with a director, working with performers. Very often, it's not about big special effects. It can be about visual effects, because they've gotten so much easier and less expensive, and they can add to a film special effects, or they can just do things like removing billboards and things that are annoying in the shot that would normally have made you do something else. You can, with some knowledge of visual effects, say, oh, let's get the shot we really need and we'll fix it. So I like small storytelling films that where you can apply the old sort of techniques of visual storytelling.
I've seen some Eastern European films not too long ago, and that's what you see. You don't see effects. You see pure story. So that's refreshing. So, an indie film in your future?
No, I'm working with a director. I did a film for ostensibly for Netflix, directed by this youngish fellow, and it was quite a bit of fun, and we developed a mutual relationship, mutual respect. So he's developing a couple more projects, and so I'm hoping that we'll go off on this adventure again together, and I'll be more involved from the beginning, so it'll be a little more, kind of all-inclusive creativity.
How do you stay inspired creatively?
Well, staying inspired creatively is, I think, one of the things that either you can do, or if you are really interested in what's next, and how do you apply the old tried and true aspects of storytelling, and understanding how people perceive stories visually, and using the old style, the reality of how the brain perceives, and the eye and the mind and all that, and also how the heart wants to understand relationships between characters and a story and so forth. Applying those aspects continuously to new stories. So I enjoy the puzzle of taking tried and true techniques and passing them on.
Dean Cundey, thank you very much for joining us for this conversation. We have to wrap it up, but it was really a treat to meet you and get a little insight from you and your background.
Well,
and
it's been
inspiration.
my pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Of course.
That's it for Full Exposure from the ASC in Hollywood. I'm your host, Jim Camp. Tony Wisniewski is our executive producer. Dan Walnicki is our editor. Susan Jacob is the colorist. Our associate producers are Kat Cantillo, Huda Khalid, and Stacey Taylor. In Hollywood, Mike Valinsky co-produced. Donna Kinski was our cinematographer. Sarah Thomas Moffat was our gaffer. Zolt Magyar was our sound mixer. And Dane Gerwig was our first AC. Our thanks to the American Society of Cinematographers for all their help. Our special thanks to Bill Bennett, Richard Crudo and Dean Cundey, and John Simmons, ASC. Also thanks to Kees van Oostrom, ASC, Patty Armacost, Alex Lopez, and Tisha Calmetto. Special thanks to ZEISS Cine LA, Snehal Patel, and Kylie Hazard. Cameras were supplied by Alternative Rentals in LA. Catch us on Instagram at ZEISS_full exposure or on the web at ZEISSfullexposure.com.